You're running a D&D adventure, but you aren't sure everyone's getting their chance to shine? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Welcome to Demystifying D&D. I'm today's host, Justin Powell, and we are going to talk about how to spotlight your players. Now, a lot of these ideas came from James D'Amato's Ultimate RPG Gameplay Guide. Check the description box below for a link to this incredibly helpful book. Spotlighting means giving each individual character the spotlight, their chance to take the reins on the story, whether that be in combat, exploration, or roleplay. Giving our players these opportunities can make them feel more involved in the game and have more fun with it. A lot of times during a single 3 to 4 hour session, 1 or 2 players might have most of the spotlight time, but it's important for us as DMs to consider how to give everyone their time in the spotlight. The main thing you're going to want to do is plan ahead of your sessions how you can create these spotlight moments for your characters. So write down a list of all of your players and their characters' names. This is what we're going to use to determine how we might find times to spotlight them during the session. There are 4 types of spotlighting that we want to consider: collective spotlight, competence spotlight, roleplay spotlight, and plot spotlight. I nailed it. Collective spotlight is an event that involves everyone in the party. The most common example of this in an RPG is combat. In combat, everyone gets their turn, so everyone is involved. These moments of collective spotlight are fun, they get everyone involved, but sometimes they don't give the full feeling of being involved in the story. It's kind of the bare minimum form of getting everyone involved and sharing the spotlight. However, this is something that comes up during every RPG. So a lot of times it's a good way to build your climax for a moment like this, for some kind of combat where everyone gets to shine. Competence spotlights are spotlights that directly engage with someone's strengths or preferences. That can either be the player or the player character. These moments indulge in the power fantasy of RPGs and really gives your player a chance to shine. Competence spotlights can engage players either through their characters or as individuals. Basically, you want to create a moment that allows them to do what they do best. Now, there are 3 separate types of competence spotlights: mechanical, experiential, and personality. Mechanical is competence based on the rules of the game. It's a challenge that the players are able to overcome based on the stats of their character. So, for example, there is a key piece of history related to an undead empire. Only one person is able to recall this kind of information: your necromantic wizard. Experiential competence is based on the character's history or any knowledge that the player might have. So if you have a rogue, perhaps they're able to identify the tattoo of an NPC that relates to a thieves guild they knew back when they were young. Personality spotlights let a character behave in a way that feels iconically them. So if your group has a barbarian that loves to go town to town to prove they're the toughest person alive, then maybe the next town they arrive at is having a strongman competition that day. Now, these 3 categories all highlight the player character, but we can also try to highlight the player themselves, the individual who's playing the character. So if you have someone who's an actor, then perhaps you could present them with an opportunity to have a dramatic, tear-filled conversation with an NPC about the morality of whether or not the nation should go to war. Or if you have a cunning strategist, then maybe you create a battlefield that they can see beforehand so they can plot out an ingenious strategy to win the day. The next spotlight to discuss is the roleplay spotlight. This gives the players the opportunity to portray their characters and investigate the story and other people in the story on a deeper level. One of the best ways that you can do this is by promoting conversation amongst your player characters throughout the session. However, you can also do this by describing what the character looks like when they're portraying a certain thing, when they're attacking in combat, when they are seeing something off in the distance that seems a bit peculiar. Or you can even give that over to the players. Say, hey, I'd like you to take narrative control of this moment. That allows your players to describe what their character looks like as they are engaging whatever activity they are engaging in. If they don't want to take up narrative control, that's totally fine. As a DM, it's your job then to describe what the PC is doing in such an engaging fashion that it highlights the player and it also brings them more into the game. Rather than saying, you slash the goblin across the chest, dealing 6 damage, you might say, you raise your mighty blade above your head as lightning cracks above you, and with a cry of rage, arc it down across the goblin's chest, who lets out a scream of agony and pain as blood splatters at your feet. You see how one's more engaging than the other? But again, if you're not up for detailing that every single time, then you can give that to the players. A lot of times asking the players, how do you want to do this? Or what does your attack look like? Will spur their imagination and get them more involved in the game. The last spotlight to consider is the plot spotlight. This is a spotlight where the plot of the adventure directly relates to a player's character. For example, maybe there's a figure from the character's past who is looking for revenge. This puts a player character at the center of the plot. However, with this spotlight, it's usually tough to get other people involved since it's so heavily reliant on a player character's backstory. So try not to use the same PC with this kind of spotlight every time. Switch it up. Maybe there's a 3-episode arc where you're investigating the rogues' connections to the Thieves Guild in the town, and then the following couple of episodes have to deal with the Warlock's patron asking something a bit morally questionable of their Warlock. Now that we understand the 4 different types of spotlights, you can plan ahead to determine which ones might arise for your player characters throughout your next session. Most of the things that we've talked about so far are how you as a DM can spotlight your players, but you can also remind your players that they have the ability to spotlight one another as well. Remind your players that this is a collaborative game and it's important to look for opportunities to give someone else more focus or the spotlight. We call this giving and taking focus. As a player, try to look for moments where you can give focus to another player character. For example, if you're at a bar and you're threatening a rude patron, rather than saying, maybe we'll have to teach you a lesson, you might say something like, you know, my buddy Torag here is known for breaking knees. Isn't that right, Torag? This gives focus to Torag, who's then able to come into that moment in a more fluid and natural way. And that's it. Now you know better how to spotlight your player characters so they can feel like the stars of the game. Let us know in the comments any tips or tricks you think work for this, and any other topics you'd like us to demystify next. Until next time, no guts, no story.